In this video, I'll be talking about essential elements. There are 92 naturally occurring elements in the world, and out of this, 20 to 25% are found to be essential elements. They act as essential elements. Scientists have found 25 essential elements in humans and 17 in plants. So, what are these so-called essential elements? So, for an example, I want you to take a human being who needs, or any other animal who needs food and water in order to survive. So we say that food and water is essential to that animal, without which it cannot survive. So in that sense, when we focus on the word essential, we can get an idea about what essential elements are. So we can say that elements which are required by a certain organism for its survival, and at the same time, in order to produce future generations, can be considered as essential to it, essential to that particular organism. So according to the definition that you see here, we say that essential elements are elements that are required by the organisms to maintain proper metabolism and structure, which is for its survival, and to complete life cycles and produce fertile offspring. As I said before, this the last part, which is responsible in producing future generations, is an important factor in considering an element as essential. So we can conclude that there are two certain criteria in order for an element to become essential, and these two criteria are: it has to complete life cycles, it has to involve in completing life cycles and producing fertile offspring, and maintaining proper metabolism and structure. So how are these essential elements identified? What do scientists use in order to identify whether an element is essential to that organism or not? So let us take the example which I used before, where a certain animal, or rather a human being, requires food and water in order to survive. So as we said, food and water is essential to that human being or animal. So in the absence of food and water, or rather in the lack of food and water, if a certain person is unable to get the required amount of food and water to maintain the proper health, then what happens is that animal succumbs to diseases due to malnutrition. That is what you see in countries like Africa and India. So using that same concept, we can identify which elements are essential to a plant or an animal. When a certain element which is essential to that animal or plant is unavailable, or if that animal or plant is unable to acquire that certain element through food, then what happens is that that plant or animal is unable to complete life cycles and produce fertile offspring, and it will not be able to maintain proper metabolism and structure. So this results in, as I said, a human being which is unable to get the necessary amounts of food and water in order to survive, succumbs to certain diseases, to not just certain diseases but many diseases, a plant or an animal which lacks the required essential elements produces deficiency symptoms that are visible through the morphological changes which can be observed and thereby determined, and thereby scientists can determine that this particular, because of the lack of this particular element, these symptoms are produced. Therefore, this element can be considered as essential to the plant or animal. Scientists use a special setup called a hydroponic culture, where they grow the plants in mineral solutions rather than soil. Thereby, they are able to control the types of nutrients which are added to the mineral solution, and thereby control the types of nutrients that are absorbed by the plant. Using this method, scientists are able to identify or determine the elements which are essential for that plant. The image that you see here is one of those hydroponic cultures where the scientists use in order to identify these essential elements. Necrosis is a plant disease where plant tissue death can be seen, especially in the region of the leaves, in the region of the leaf tissue. This is a result of the deficiency in calcium, magnesium, potassium, and copper, which are all essential elements which are essential to the plant. One more important factor which you should keep in mind is that necrosis is a plant disease which is caused due to a deficiency in certain essential elements, whereas there's another natural process which is carried out by the mitochondria in plant cells, which is responsible for causing natural cell death. Necrosis is not the same as that natural process. Here's an example of a deficiency symptom which can be seen in animals, especially in humans. This condition is called iron deficiency anemia. This is caused due to a lack of iron, which as a result reduces the hemoglobin protein molecule production, which is responsible for transporting oxygen and carbon dioxide in blood. So hemoglobin molecule needs iron. Hemoglobin molecule has a heme group within it, which enables it to bind with the oxygen and the carbon dioxide in the blood, and thereby the hemoglobin protein molecule is carries the oxygen and carbon dioxide throughout the body. So when there is a lack of iron, which is an essential element, the body is unable to produce adequate amount of hemoglobin protein molecule to transport oxygen throughout the body. As a result, this causes iron deficiency anemia. So what are the different types of essential elements that can be found in nature? Basically, we can categorize essential elements into two, as macroelements or macronutrients, and the other is microelements or micronutrients. In certain reference books, they have categorized essential elements into three, as major, semi-major, and minor elements. Major and semi-major elements are the same as macroelements. They have divided the macroelements again into two, as major and semi-major, according to the concentration levels present in that organism compared to their dry weight. So major elements have a higher weight compared to semi-major elements. And minor elements are the same as microelements. Essential elements which are present uh, in organisms having a greater or equal weight than 0.01% of the dry weight of an organism is considered as a macro element, or rather macronutrient. So what is this dry weight, the dry weight of an organism? The word dry should give you an idea about it, since you refer to a surface as dry when it has no wetness on that surface. When there is no wetness on the surface, we refer it to as being dry. Therefore, in that similar sense, when the liquid content of an organism is removed, the remaining weight of the organism is referred to as the dry weight of that organism. So when elements have a higher weight, have an equal or greater weight than 0.01% compared to this dry weight, then it is considered as a macroelement. So looking at the examples that are given below, starting from carbon, we have hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. This makes up 96% compared to dry weight. 96% of the macroelements that are found, that are commonly found in organisms. We have phosphorus, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, which makes up around 3 to 4% of the macroelements. Moving on to microelements, elements which are found to have a weight lesser than 0.01% of the dry weight of an organism are considered as microelements. I have given a few examples out of the many which are found in organisms. Starting from iron, we have chlorine, molybdenum, copper, zinc, boron, manganese, sodium, and nickel. Now, you might be wondering why I had highlighted iron and chlorine. So, when it comes to animals, iron and chlorine are considered as macroelements, whereas in plants, iron and chlorine are considered as microelements. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, which are considered as macroelements, are three very important elements which take part in playing a huge role in forming the four major biological molecules, which are carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. Carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen play a huge role in making up these four major biological molecules, and this is one of the reasons why you find a higher percentage of these, especially these three elements, including nitrogen. So I'll be talking about the functions, but I will not be going into a greater depth. The main reason I want to talk about the functions is to give you an idea about how these macroelements and microelements are associated with the organism, and at the same time how we can differentiate between these two in terms of function. How macroelements differ from microelements and vice versa. So taking into account my macroelements first, we have, of course, the first three very important elements: carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. As I mentioned before, they act as structural components of carbohydrates, proteins, lipids, and nucleic acids. Next, we have phosphorus. which act as a structural component of nucleotides, nucleic acids, phospholipids, and ADP and ATP. ADP and ATP are energy carriers. They are responsible in carrying energy and providing energy when needed within organisms. Calcium, they act as structural components of chlorophyll and middle lamellae, which is found in between the cell walls of the plant cells. The chemical composition of it is calcium pectate, uh, which we'll be talking about in the future videos. Iron, which of course is considered as a macro element in animals, act as a structural component of hemoglobin and cytochrome and nitrogenase enzymes. But do remember that iron and chlorine is considered as a micro element in plants. Going through these functions, you might have noticed that all of these macro elements were involved as structural components. They were involved in making up certain making up these biological molecules, and this is one common factor which you can find throughout each and every macro element, where almost all of them involve as structural components, and then this does not mean that they do not involve in physiological process, chemical process, and even in metabolism, but they mostly involve as structural components. Moving on to microelements, we have started from boron. I have only given 3 examples here because I only want to give you an idea about how about these 2 elements and how they differ from each other in terms of function. So considering boron, it involves in calcium 2+ uptake and use, and in cell elongation and differentiation. Chlorine, maintain ionic balance in cells, and zinc, they act as enzyme activators. So now you see here that they mostly involve in physiological process, chemical process, and metabolic process, and they you do not see them involved as structural components of biological molecules. Critical concentration, we can consider this critical concentration, as the optimum level at which an essential element should be present in a certain organism for it to maintain a proper metabolic process structure, and to complete its life cycles and produce fertile offspring without any issue. So when an essential element, when the concentration level of an essential element is below this critical concentration, it produces deficiency symptoms. Since below this concentration level, it is considered that essential element is considered as being deficient to that particular organism, and if that essential element is present above this critical concentration and above in excess, it causes toxicity. So for an example, if an organism has copper in excess, it results in vomiting and diarrhea, and if it has cobalt in excess, it results in cobalt poisoning. So these two examples are mainly focused on animals rather than in plants. So this is all for this video. I hope this gives you an idea about what essential elements are and how they are associated with these with organisms. In the next video, I'll be talking about the four major biological molecules. So until then, take care.